our show, the blooming pop artist Joshua and Wafa. Please welcome them both. Hi, Joshua. Hi, Wafa.
What's up?
Hello.
Hi.
How's it going? How are you doing?
It's good. The lockdown's been a little harsh because, I usually like going out, but yeah, stuck at home. Otherwise, it's pretty good though.
Pretty uncomfortable with the lockdown, but since I'm not a really social person, I'm pretty comfortable now.
Well, I'm getting two perspectives. One is extroverted and another is introverted, and both are giving me different view on lockdown. Well, let's go to the agenda of the call. So we are meeting here to discuss on pop art, isn't it? So Joshua, please tell me about what is pop art. Can you give us a brief background and origin of it?
Sure. All right. So pop art can be considered one of the most significant yet controversial movements of the 20th century, controversial art movement. So it was started in the year 1952 in London when a group of artists, architects, and writers created this group called the Independent Group. So what they wanted to do was they wanted to incorporate the relationship between pop culture and visual art. So their major inspiration was American advertising and comics of that day. So what they actually wanted to do was, back in that day, I mean, during that time period, art was all about your self-expression, and people had to deduce what they wanted to know from that. I mean, at the end of the day, it used to be like what people wanted to know, and maybe it might not be the same message that you wanted to put forward as such. So pop art stood out. It was vastly different in a way that it was actually a movement that was very inclusive, and it actually had a mass appeal that even a common man could understand it, per se.
This originated in UK, right?
In London, yes. Yeah.
London. All right.
Yeah.
So, can you please brief us on the significance of pop art?
Yeah, like I mentioned, actually. So, what happens is pop art. The main thing that sets it apart is that it's inclusive. It's like it is very straightforward in a way that a common man can easily understand what it is actually willing to convey, per se, though. Because a lot of times art is such that it would have all these loud shapes and maybe colors and a lot of intensity in the brushstrokes, and you'll have to deduce a message from it. But pop art is one where you just like it's right on your face. It is what it shows. It's nothing else, nothing hidden underneath. That's about it, though, in pop art.
As much as it's inclusive, it's like exclusive of sorts, because usually when people hear the term art, they expect it to be something that's really difficult to understand or really difficult to create. But pop art branch from the idea that art doesn't have to be extremely complicated to pursue. It's like it's as you see. It's just something as you see, and you understand it on the surface level of its basis. It's that simple. It's more direct without having to, usually some artists say that, okay, this is a painting, I'm just going to put a full stop in the middle of a painting and now you interpret whatever you want. But like, people interpret art differently, but pop art is something that you see and you get to understand what the meaning it is as its value, sort of thing. And it's controversial as well, which I think made a lot of people like the idea, alongside it being a little controversial to a lot of other people.
Yeah.
Well, controversial as in it's just like what you see is what you understand. There's no deeper meaning to it. That's what you said, right?
Yes. So because I'll tell you what. So during the inception of pop art, or during the time when, so there's this one artist whose name was Andy Warhol. So Andy Warhol, he's considered one of the most significant, or let's just say one of the most famous figures in pop art. He's the one who brought pop art to the mainstream, like to an international acclaim, per se. So his artworks were mostly screen prints, and it was controversial in a way because it was directly like exactly advertising, because as one of his most famous works is called Campbell's Soup, which is literally just the advertisement for a can of soup. So a lot of people, there was a huge furore as in like in the art community, though not among the common people. The controversy was in the art community, as in like they felt like pop artists were actually destroying what art was supposed to be. They wanted art to be a very niche, a very classy particular medium, which only the select few could understand or the select few could interpret. But with the advent of pop art, anybody could make it, and it was understandable by almost anybody as such. So that's what made it very different.
So would you like to add anything to it, Wafa?
Yeah, like I said, it's like the idea of pop art is to simplify art as a structure, as a whole, to a lot of people, because I think it's really important for everyone to resonate with art or relate to art, and not just artists. There are so many artworks or artists that create something that is really appreciative, but on the other hand, it's really complex to understand, sort of. But I think pop art changed that for a lot of people, and they were open to the idea of exploring art, or like pursuing art as a subject or as a profession, I think. And that's the advent of pop art, I guess.
Whenever you create a pop art, is that like it goes with the trend? What is the current scenario happening in the politics or in the nation, the same as presented in the pop art, so that it makes controversial
Exactly.
in some or other way?
Yes, so there are two stories about the advent of pop, like the name pop art itself. One is because of its high significance to the current pop culture and the current scenario. So, so right now, one of the major issues that's happening is, there are two major issues that is happening. One is the global pandemic with the coronavirus, and you can see, even if a person doesn't call himself a pop artist, there are a lot of artworks that have actually been pop art style, maybe if we can call it that, which has depicted the coronavirus. And second, like the most recent one is the crisis that's happening in Palestine, where you can see multiple street artists who have actually been working and who've been supporting political issues that have been happening between the two countries, which is where Palestine has been invaded by Israel per se, though. So in a way, yes, it is actually like to the current trend which is happening, though. That's how it is.
Yeah, I think it's more like pop art is not just art, but it's sort of an opinion that is portrayed. And I think sometimes, and I think that's when the controversy arises, right? Because you're having an opinion through art, and you're not just making art, but you expressing your opinion through it. And a lot of people might agree with that opinion, and you'd have a lot of other people who don't. And I think that's where the entire term controversy plays its role in the idea of pop art, or its genre as a art form.
So true. Everybody has a different view, and the same is represented in the art, and that's where the controversy starts. Well, who all can learn pop art, and where can they learn?
Anybody can actually. So what happens is a lot of people think pop art is just one particular style of art, which is basically what people think of when they say pop art. Is they either think of artworks by Roy Lichtenstein, or they might think of something by Andy Warhol. These are like two of the most famous artists who are pop artists, I must say. But at the end of the day, pop art is a movement. It's not a style of art per se. Pop art can be anything that relates to the current scenarios. It can be something that has a mass appeal. It can be considered mass-produced art in a way. Pop art is something that can be easily reproduced a lot of times. Like Andy Warhol, for instance, when he made his Marilyn Monroe series, he made around 30 to 40 copies of it, because at the end of the day, a lot of people can have it. So rather right now, what they're focusing on is actually a quantity which can be circulated among the people per se, though.
Wafa, you tell me about, do a common man requires extra skills to learn this pop art, or it's just any other form of art that requires only the imagination so that they can put it on the paper?
I think probably not just specifically to pop art in itself, but any form of art. I don't think you necessarily have to have a set of skills, or you need to be like a cognizant at it. I think artists, what binds them together is how keenly they observe the environment. I think a lot of artists, I think every artist is hugely inspired by the surrounding, and any genre it could be. So I think it's like, at the end of the day, I think art basically is just, when you create something, you need to make sure the audience feels something when they look at it. It could be as simple as just a full stop on a huge canvas, or it could be something as complicated as anything that you've ever seen before. But I think as an artist, personally, what I feel, when you're making something, you need to begin with the fact that when I'm making something, and if someone sees this, they need to feel any emotion. It could be agony, it could be happiness, it could be placidity, it could be any form of emotion, but you need to make the person doing it feel something. And I think art as a term itself is like very vast, like when I'm making something or when I'm creating something, it stems out of my emotions or my expression. But if you're going to view it, you're going to view it in a way that you relate most to it. Correct? And as long as you create something and someone feels something by looking at it, I think you are just a wonderful artist, and it doesn't have to be complex as such. It's basically how well you translate your thoughts into visuals. And I think that's where you need to practice. Like if you get that part sorted, the ability to transform your thoughts into visuals, I think then anyone can become an artist. And I think it takes a lot of practice and stuff, but I think it's not a form, or it's not a field where, you know, particular set of people are privileged to pursue. I think everyone can become an artist. I think that's how wonderful art is.
Well, you mean to say that people who show their emotions can become artists?
Yes.
So
Yes.
emotions are the basic element to become artists, so that they can portray whatever the emotions on the paper, right?
Yes.
Exactly.
So the whole thing starts with an idea, you know, like, so imagine you have one particular idea. You don't have to be artistically trained to depict that idea. You can depict it, maybe imagine you want to depict it through one shade of color. That can be enough to depict the idea, because that is what you feel it depicts as such. And if I come back to pop art as a medium, or as an art style, if you can call it, a lot of times pop art can include collage. It can include maybe just screen prints and stuff, which would not require a very high-ended artistic training per se, maybe a basic technical knowledge. And if you have an imagination that runs wild, I think that's enough to make you an artist as such.
For instance, there are a lot of like comics you see, they're just made with plain stick figures, but the idea of like, you know, the storytelling is like, I think the most cardinal part of being an artist, like your storytelling capacity and your ability of doing well at that. Like you see, it doesn't have to be really complex. Like you can use just plain stick figures, but the way you portray it is what matters, not the style or not how much work you've put into it, but just the thought process and how well you've translated what you thought in your head.
The user interpretation also matters. It's not just artist emotions and all, right? So if at all, once you create a piece of art on the paper and the end user couldn't interpret, how would you react for it?
Then you're failed as an artist. Honestly, I think that the audience can never fail as an audience, but if someone is not able to interpret or feel anything with what you've made, then you've failed as an artist, and the audience is not failed as an audience, because you can create something and you can't blame someone for not feeling anything by looking at it. But you can ask yourself that probably I didn't do well enough, you know, which is the risky part, because you're just showing your artwork, you're just showing something you've created to anyone. It can be like even a small kid or someone who's really understanding of their surroundings, but they just need to feel anything. And if they don't, you can't blame them for not doing so.
Yeah. So what happens is, imagine like 10 people are looking at one artwork. The way each person interprets it will be different from the way the other person interprets it. So 10 people can have 10 different perspectives.
True.
So as an artist, maybe imagine you want to depict joy. Maybe another person might depict the same thing as sorrow. So yeah, at the end of the day, the audience is going to depict something from your artwork. And if at any point you're not able to like instill any emotion in a particular audience member, I think that's when you've failed as an artist.
Okay. Suppose you fail as an artist in the first whatever you have done, and how do you overcome it? How do you better present in the next of it?
So fail as an artist, there are different ways you can say it. I mean, fail as an artist isn't, as a passionate artist, you can never fail. I'll tell you, it's almost close to impossible to fail, because at the end of the day, anything you give out is anything you make. If you like what you're making, generally that's art. That can be considered art. And there are 7 billion people in the world. One person might like it. So that in that way, yes, you can't fail as an artist. Financially, it's a different thing, because yeah, if you want to have a professional career as an artist, yes, a lot of times you would also have to look into what each and every, maybe imagine you shouldn't like look at maybe pleasing one person. You might have to look at pleasing 10 people instead if you want to like professionally be an artist. That's the difference basically.
So when we say failed as an artist, it's subjective. It's not necessarily you've failed at pursuing anything. It's like, see, for instance, you make something and you have your opinion on it, right? And if, for instance, I make something and I'm able to feel something when I look at it, there are probably like thousands of people like me who's going to feel something out of it. But when I make it and I look at it and I don't feel anything at all, it's like I've not been able to come to terms with my own emotions. So you're just creating something without any emotion just for the heck of putting it out there. And I think that's what you shouldn't do. You need to feel something yourself. And if you feel something yourself, then I'm sure there would be like thousands of people who might feel the same or feel differently or not feel anything at all. But at least like in hundreds, if you're going to make one person feel something, that is something that you've achieved, you know. I think it begins with the whole part that you create something and you definitely feel something out of it. And I think that's where it branches from.
There's actually a very interesting story. I mean, one of the most famous artists in the world is Vincent van Gogh. So during his lifetime, he could sell 2 artworks. He made a lot of artwork. He could just sell 2, 1 or 2, I guess, if I'm not wrong. That was because one thing is his ideas or his, or whatever he made was very, like, it was like ahead of his time. So maybe not now. It might be appreciated in the future. So that's what I usually tell a lot of people who, you know, are on the verge of giving up on art is because, you know what, just give it some time. Maybe if not now, maybe 10 years down the line, you might find someone who really falls in love with their artwork, because I feel like an art piece will speak to you sometime or the other. You look at an artwork, there, like you go to an art gallery, there might be a certain section that clicks with you. Maybe it might be the Renaissance section that clicks with you. But for many others, it might be the modern art section that clicks with them. So at the end of the day, it is just about finding the right person who likes it. That's the thing.
True. One should sell things to the right person. Then only they know the value of it.
Selling is secondary at the end of the day. Selling is secondary.
It's a struggle to, like, when you begin, you need to be clear with the fact that you're probably not going to make a lot of money with this profession. You just need to tell yourself that if you're looking to make a lot of money, or if you're that's your idea of it, then I think this field might not be the most advisable for you, because there's a struggle. It's a struggle, honestly. Like, as much as people love art and stuff like that, and as much as they appreciate it, on the contrary, they're not going to buy it. You know, it's like there's a fine line that's drawn between liking something and actually standing for it. And I think that's where artists are like hanging in the middle at this line. But also it's something that when you start as an artist, I think it's really important you do something alongside being an artist, probably something that's more absolute, or something that you can depend on or rely on, and still pursue what you like doing. And eventually, if you know that this is what I want to do and this is what's I'm going to make a living out of, probably then you should plunge into it completely. But like lots of artists who make a lot of money, and there are really great artists who make really great work, but they still don't make as much money. I think it's also a lot of luck and fortune as well. But through it all, you just need to be really patient as an artist. Like, if you don't have patience, then it's going to be really hard. Because I've seen a lot of people personally who say that, okay, I want to become an artist, and they make like 4 or 5 artworks and they don't see a good response, and they're like, I'm not doing this like anymore. It's I don't benefit out of it. So you can't have that mindset when being an artist. You need to be really, really patient, honestly.
Yeah, because I remember when I first started selling art, the first 6 years, I didn't make one sale. Not in one sale. Like, I was making artworks just piling up. I didn't make one sale. I think I made one sale, and even then that guy bargained it and he bought it for $200, if I'm not wrong. So that's what happened. So that's the second thing that I actually always think of when I do feel like a lot of times the general public also takes artists for granted, because when I have some freelance work per se, I imagine like he would go for a particular freelance work and they'd be like, okay, we can't pay you for this, but you'd gain a great exposure. But what you don't realize, exposure doesn't pay our bills. We do have bills like any normal person. You don't go to a doctor and you'd be like, doctor, I have a fever, but I can't pay you right now, but you'd have the exposure of treating me. You can't say that, right? So at the end of the day, I mean, the general public should also be educated as to like, you need to like monetarily help the artist for whatever they are doing. I mean, they do have the same bills that you get. They do have the same responsibilities that you have. Just because we're an artist does not mean that we're like Rasta and we're like traveling around and we don't have any responsibility, no care in the world, but yeah, we do have the same. So I think that's one thing people should realize though, yeah.
I think generally, like if you see on a wider term, specifically in, I don't know, my experience, like in India, idea of being an artist, at least until recently, especially by the previous generations, weren't really looked upon as something that requires talent or something that could gain you a future, I guess. Because recently, like I said, we had an exhibit on Church Street and stuff like that, and we were displaying our artworks and stuff. So there was someone who passed by us. She was holding her kid in her hand, and we could hear her saying that, this is why I tell you to study, because I don't want you to sit on the road and sell your stuff.
Oh, that's awkward.
Yeah. So the idea of art, I think in India, at least for the older generations, is not as wide or is not as ambiguous, at least for now, which is why people are kind of skeptical to even want to pay anything for it. You'd have a lot of people coming up to you and saying, oh, wow, this is really great and stuff like that. And then it's like, I can see you put in a lot of effort. And then they ask you for the price and you tell them and they're like, they start bargaining with you, which I think is a little contrary, because you just told me I put in a lot of effort and now you're bargaining to pay an amount for it. So yeah, that's a struggle. But it's great to see that, at least recently, that considering the younger generation is really driven by art and thrives on art, like if you see on Instagram or like social media per se, there are a lot of artists growing and using social media platforms to portray their work and stuff like that. It's becoming more ambiguous and open, I think, of late, and it's really great to see that. And yeah, I hope that it gets better with time. It's always a struggle for an artist, to be honest.
And one thing I do tell people is you can, if you want to buy an art, you can buy it. If you don't want to buy an art, that's also okay. But one thing that actually hurts an artist per se is when you start bargaining, because what happens is, I remember once that I was actually doing a freelance work, and there was this one particular work which I finished in like 30 minutes and I gave it to him. And he's like, can I just pay you like half the money because you finished in 30 minutes? I'm like, okay, you just see the 30 minutes right now, but you don't know the 10 years that I spent to actually gain the skills to do that in 30 minutes. So that's what a lot of people do have to see, a lot of the back work that has to be done though. So that's another thing that we have to realize as people though.
I know the efforts are not appreciated well in India basically. So how do you react if you get a positive compliment and negative?
This is actually very interesting because the reaction is going to be the same, because one thing is a positive, we don't have anything to change. That means you're doing good in whatever you're doing. So continue as you are. And if it's a negative feedback, yes, you do listen to them. You do appreciate that they gave you that particular feedback. But I tell you, as an artist, don't change. You know why? Because that is your niche, that's your style. You can't please everybody at the end of the day. So, it's not something very technical, which has to be like precise to a point. It's art, and art is your expression. If someone can't understand what you want to express, that is okay. At the end of the day, but that doesn't mean you get into a fist fight with somebody just because they didn't like your artwork. They have the right to not like your artwork. That's the thing. But at the end of the day, and at the same time, you have the right to not change. You have the right to not follow what they told you also. So that's the thing.
As artists, if you see, we ourselves, we are really skeptical about the work we put. For instance, I'm making something and I keep looking at it, and after a point, and then I'm like, once I'm done with it, I don't like this piece anymore. So I just don't like it anymore, and I don't resonate with it anymore. And I think that's the part where a lot of artists struggle, because a lot of artists take a lot of time to develop that confidence to actually put their stuff out there, because they are really skeptical about the fact that what if I put it and no one likes it, And that's where we need to tell ourselves that I like it, I don't like it, I'll put it out there. So even if I don't like it, there might be a few people who might like it. But unless you put it out there and get the criticism or get the appreciation, you are never going to learn unless you're going to show it to someone else. And I think that's really important, to get feedback, whether it's constructive or whether it's positive. As long as you're going to learn something from it, I think it's really important to do that. And I encourage everyone who is also going to watch this, if you're making something, then definitely put it out there. And I'm sure it might be hard at first, but eventually you'll find your audience who like your stuff. As long as you're true to yourself while making it, I'm pretty sure that it might take time, but you're still gonna do well eventually.
Yeah.
Well, how different is pop art to another forms of art?
So one thing about art is it's very, very vast. So if you think about it, there are like you have the neoclassical styles, you have the Renaissance styles, you have what is called the romantic artist, then you have the expressionist, the impressionist. So art as a medium is very vast. So one thing I found which sets this one pop art separately from all the other styles is that it actually it is the first form of art that was made for the common man. So I mean, ancient art was, yes, made by the people for the common people per se, but after that, like if you think about the Renaissance artists, they basically made it for the royalty or for noblemen per se, and any period of art was made for the higher class of society, the highest strata of society. But pop art is one such artwork which is made for the common people, and it was also made a lot of times by the common people as well. So in a way, that is what makes it stand out.
Okay, well, what's the difference between caricature and pop art? I think it's one and the same, right?
Caricature is basically a portrait that is made in a cartoonic style.
Okay.
So caricature is just one style of art. Pop art in general is a movement. It's a movement which is all about, it is all about a lot of different styles of art which pertain to pop culture. So caricature is just maybe, drawing a portrait with an exaggeration of a particular feature, maybe. That's what makes it different. But caricature is just a skill. Pop art is rather a movement. So that's how we call it.
Okay, well, Wafa, where all can we use this art? Can we sell it in business form, and can we get into the marketing techniques so that as an artist, one can make money and also help the entrepreneurs to sell their product?
I think that question in itself is really vast, because whether it's any form of art, I think to sell it, you have to have a certain base or a certain following yourself as such, because it's not just specifically for pop art. I think if you do well as an artist, or if people like your work, no matter what form of art it is, they are going to be ready to put it out there. And I think right now the best form of selling any kind of art is through social media, because it's the best platform you can find as such, because you can connect with people of different spaces and different origins, and which you can't do organically. It's not possible, because you meet a very few people organically, and some of them might like it, some of them might not. But when you say social media, there's a vast audience that you can reach out to, who might like your artwork and who might reach out to you specifically for it. So I think you can use it anywhere. There's no specific platform as such that it's just primitive to that particular area of belonging as such. But I think generally art as a thing in itself, you can use it anywhere. It's not specific, but also it depends. If you're plunging into a pop art that is a bit controversial, then I think automatically your audience become a little more niche and not as expansive as it would be otherwise. Because even if for instance I sell you something and you like it and you have an opinion towards it, you won't put it out there necessarily because you fear that other people might not like it. For instance, if I'm making a controversial pop art, I can't go and approach a cafe saying that, could you display my artwork there? Because they know that in this cafe, there are going to be multiple kinds of people with different thought processes who are going to appear here. So some of them might like, some of them might not. Yeah, that's the one thing you have to keep in mind. If you're plunging into pop art that's a bit controversial, that consists of politics and such, then you have to be a little more careful with where you put them up or whom you approach with it. But otherwise, I think it's fine. Art generally as a platform, you can put it anywhere.
Would you like to add anything to it, Joshua?
So yeah, like she mentioned, finding a niche audience is the main thing. And yes, pop art has been used multiple times across the decades. The main thing it was used in is advertising, because it basically grew, drew inspiration from American advertising, like the Campbell Soups or the older fitness magazines per se. Even now, a lot of pop artists do collaborate with a lot of major brands. Like recently, there was this artist called Cos who actually collaborated with Air Jordan, and they have the Cos Jordans that have been released. And also you do have major brands like Supreme or Balenciaga, which do have a lot of artistic collabs. So yeah, pop art is something that involves a lot of collabs and stuff. So yes, it is used across multiple stratas of be it advertising, be it fashion, any particular industry.
What made you choose this art thing as profession?
So yeah, okay, that's. I think you should go first. I'll go after.
It started with me because I like art, and also I just don't like science, math, all of that. I cannot wrap my head around it. And for me, art has always been like an escape from reality. Because honestly, if you see, reality is pretty boring. There's nothing around you that you might, there's to look forward to. And for me, art has always been an escape or like a refuge sort of. And like I told you, I had studied science, but I've always been inclined to art. And I'm grateful that my parents were really supportive of this field of choice that I had. And they never really questioned or said, you know, what if it doesn't work out tomorrow? And I think usually a lot of parents might think otherwise, and it's going to be hard to convince them. But if you know that this is what you want to do, then you definitely have to like go for it. And yeah, but otherwise, like art, as in generally, I've always been inclined to it. Like even when I was a little kid, I didn't have a lot of friends. I would just have my sketchbook and a pen with me, and I'd sit in some corner and sketch everything that was around me. And I think it's always been a place of comfort for me, and it wouldn't be great to have anything else as a profession, honestly.
Oh well, what gives you inspiration to draw things?
So what happens is ideas just happen at the heat of the moment. Maybe like it's just like a spark. It just happens at one particular time. Because so there have been times when actually I would be waiting for weeks to get an idea to make something, and I wouldn't have anything, and it'd just be a block. And then there might be like one particular week where I'd get like 5 to 6 different ideas. Maybe if I see something or if I read something, I would get an idea. So it all depends on what you want to turn into an idea. At the end of the day, ideas are around you. It depends on what you would want to turn into an idea or into a concept, which you have to depict by a visual medium or any other medium per se.
For me, usually ideas as such, so like I always like playing with reality metaphorically. Like if you see in a few of my artworks and stuff like that, I'd like people to relate to it, but also when people see it, I want them to think of it as, oh, I didn't predict this thing, but still relate to it. For instance, there's one of this artwork that I made. So people are aware of an astronaut, people are aware of the moon, people are aware of a pizza. So I played around with reality, and there's an astronaut, and instead of a moon, there's a pizza. So then people look at it and relate to it that, okay, I like pizza and the astronaut likes a moon. So now the astronaut is looking at pizza. So it's like an aberration of reality, to mess around with reality a bit. Like, you know, there are a lot of artists who I appreciate who like pursue photorealistic artworks. It's just like you make exactly what you're seeing in front of you. But that takes away the whole idea of you being able to do anything with art. I mean, you could just click a photograph, and instead of making the entire thing as you see it, right? You can always manipulate with art. You can go crazy with it. And I think that's the best part of it. And I think that's where you should experiment. Like, there's no boundaries you need to follow. You can make anything. And I think that's where that's what makes art really interesting for me, that you can do anything and you don't have to justify yourself for it.
Yeah. And that's like she mentioned. Yeah, there are a lot of people who make like photorealistic artworks. And yes, it is very commendable and it is very beautiful to look at. And I know it takes sheer hard work to do that. But personally, as an artist, what I would, I feel is like when you make something with those imperfections, which are yours and yours alone, that is what actually gives it that beauty. You know, like if my artwork didn't have a particular imperfection, it wouldn't be my own style. It would just be a photograph, like at the end of the day. So it all depends on adding a bit of yourself into that artwork. I mean, it might sound pretty cliche if I say it like that, but yes, it is that imperfection, or it is that, let's say, that diversion from reality, or that diversion from realism that actually makes an artwork what it is.
Yeah, basically it's your form of expression. So like, make use of that. Like, when someone sees it, they need to know that, okay, this is how they might have felt, you know, like any sort of emotion, but just like experiment with it.
Well, Wafa, is it easy to express any kind of emotions in the art piece? Like, there are a few things we cannot articulate in the words. Can we do it in the form of art?
Exactly. So that's the best part of art usually. So like, honestly, I'm like a poet as well. Anonymous
nice.
poet sort of. So like, there are a lot of things that you can't really express with words sometimes, because it's a feeling, sort of, it's really abstract and you can't really translate that feeling. But with art, you can always draw it out, like for instance, when I sit with a piece of paper in front of me and I'm feeling this intense emotion and I just start scribbling on the page, it automatically translates to how you're feeling, because that's the mood you're in, that's the way you're feeling at that point. And I think it's basically putting out your frustration or putting out your joy or spilling everything out on that piece of paper. And I think it doesn't have to be definitive or doesn't have to be distinctive, but as long as when you're sitting down to make something and you're really flooded with an emotion and you just start drawing, it automatically translates in your artwork. I guess it's very intrinsic like that. And a lot of paintings you see modern art as well, right? It's a lot of strokes, it's a lot of things that you can't explain, but when you see it, you can know that, okay, this is subtle and this is peaceful to look at, but on the other hand, this is tumultuous and this is chaotic to look at. It's seen in the strokes, it's seen in the way you draw, it's seen in the colors you use.
True.
And honestly, for me, I'm like an inking artist as well. I use a lot of black and white in my artwork, but that doesn't necessarily take away from the emotion I feel. It's not necessarily that colors are really important all the time. But yeah, I think it's like the idea of just feeling something when you begin your art, I think it intrinsically translates to what you have on paper.
Well, given an option, would you like to be a poet or an artist or both?
So it's like,
you said
it's like a question. It's like, I'd like to say that poetry is as important to me as my heart, and art is as important to me as my hands. I can't function without either of them, like poetry is like a liberation for me, something that I set myself free, and which is why I'm anonymous, because usually when I know that, okay, a lot of people know who's writing this, I'm really influenced by what they think of it. But when I'm anonymous, I could write anything and people don't know it's you, so they're going to appreciate it. And on the other hand, art is like a refuge for me, my safe space, where I can just go and hide somewhere. That is art for me. And poetry is like a liberation where I set myself free. I can't choose between either of them. And which is why I try to like combine both of them together. So when I'm writing poetry, I try to make an illustration that goes along with it. So combine both together. That's what I usually do.
I think that will be easy to comprehend by any person if you combine poem and art.
Yeah, I guess.
You have seen Wafa's work, right? Being an artist, how would it feel to judge another artist's piece of work?
See, judging can be in two ways. Okay, so one, I have the right to like their artwork and not like their artwork. I mean, that is my personal right. I mean, with any artwork. But the improper way of judging his artwork would be just to go around asking, how dare you make this artwork, or why would you make something like this? See, you have the freedom to like an artwork and not like an artwork, but to judge a person's creative fire, a person's imagination is something I'm pretty much against.
Well, what would you say about it, Wafa? Like, how would you judge Joshua's artwork?
On a broader term, I think, like he said, like there are two spectrums through which you can approach someone's artwork. Like you either like it or you don't. But I don't think anyone has that privilege to, like judge someone's work or say that, okay, this is not good, or it might not be good for me, but it might be great to a lot of other people. So I can either like it, learn something from it, take something from it, or just like ignore it completely. But I cannot comment or disregard the effort put in by the artist. And subjectively, if you ask me about Joshua's artwork, I think like I said, we both gel together really well because our thought processes are sort of similar. Although our individual art forms vary quite a bit significantly, I think, but our thought processes are pretty similar, like the idea of approaching like art generally, or like how we see our surroundings and stuff like that, but we implement it differently of sorts. Like he's more inclined to pop art specifically, although he explores a lot of other spectrums, but he's more inclined towards pop art. And like I said, I'm although my artworks have an essence of pop art, but it's inclined towards macabre, a sort of form as such. But yeah, there are two ways you can approach anyone's artwork, I guess.
Okay, when it comes to your own artwork, how do you approach it? What is your basic idea to start with, and how do you end it?
To be honest, like a lot of my artwork stems from these really dark corners of myself, like I usually don't come to terms with, which is why I say art to me is like a refuge, because usually me as a person, I'm mostly in the denial phase of a lot of things that happen in reality. But when it comes to art, I need to come to terms with a certain way that I'm feeling, which I don't otherwise. And that's how I approach my artwork. Generally, when I make something, it's out of this part of myself that is explored only when I'm creating art and not otherwise. Yeah, it stems from this whole place of me that exists within me that I don't acknowledge otherwise. And yeah, that's how it's usually with me and my artworks, a lot of them.
Well, it's nice. How would you approach your artwork, Joshua?
So for me, my artworks are not like that deep or anything like that. Mine's just like very, very straightforward, very to the point. So there was a point when I was back in art school, I really tried. I mean, I used to make a lot of artworks, which I would spend a lot of time thinking about putting deeper meanings to it, to have a lot of hidden messages in it. But, but the problem was every time I kept an exhibition, people were just staring at it. They'd be like, okay, what is it? That's about it. So I just wanted to make something that was like very straightforward. See, one thing I actually know, or one thing I got to know after all these years is the best artists are not the richest. Like there is that story of the starving artist. I feel a lot of times they starve because their products don't sell, because I know they put a lot of emotional baggage into it. They put a lot of their heart and soul into it. But we can't expect a normal person to actually understand what we're showing them. See, that's what I said. There are two ways. You can either be a passionate artist who makes art for your general audience, and you can be assured that at least one person will like it. Or if you want to professionally be an artist, you need to make it in such a way that at least 10 people would like it. So that's how I try to approach my art. It's very straightforward. It's something, I personally want to make stuff which I myself would put on my wall. So that's how I make my stuff. So.
Well, is there any art work that is very close to your heart, and why do you like it so much?
Okay, there are quite a few actually. So back from my art school days, I was really a big fan of Salvador Dali. He is a surrealistic artist, and one particular work of his which really strikes a chord is The Persistence of Memory. And coming to pop art, I really like Roy Lichtenstein. Then there is Andy Warhol. And one of my favorite artists is actually a modern artist called Damien Hirst. So Damien Hirst is a very controversial artist, but I like the fact that he is willing to cross those boundaries. One of my favorite works by him is called Cow and Chicken. It was made for a restaurant in the UK called Cow and Chicken. So he literally found a dead cow and a dead chicken, and he put them in formaldehyde. That was his artwork. It's on Google. It's called Cow and Chicken. You can just type Damien Hirst Cow and Chicken. You can just find it. And his most famous work is actually he went to a butterfly park and he caught like around 1 million butterflies, and he made like 3 paintings with them. Not 3 paintings, 3 artworks with them.
Oh,
so yeah,
nice.
Peter's against him, but yeah, I like the fact that he's willing to cross those barriers in a way just to put his message across, maybe. So those are the few artworks I like. Basically.
Okay, that's nice. What about you, Wafa? Which art piece of yours it is very close to your heart?
Of mine, so there's this thing that I made. It's called The Forbidden Love. Basically, it's an artwork that consists of an astronaut and a mermaid. Okay, they are like hovering in space, and they're trying to be together, but it's like the fact that they're not together metaphorically is what I tried to capture. Like I said, people should see it. They shouldn't expect it, but they should relate to it. Like in reality, you see a lot of people, they really like each other, love each other, but they can't be together. So that's the essence I tried to capture with that artwork. It's like the idea of an astronaut and a mermaid falling in love, but the idea that they can never be together. So that's my personal favorite of mine that I've made. And when it comes to artists, I really love Andrew Wyeth, and my favorite painting of his would be The Witching Hour. Alongside, then there is Pascal Campion. He's an illustrator, and the way he plays with light is just beautiful. Like, he captures emotions that you experience on a daily basis. And a lot of times we experience a lot of moments that happen in our life on a daily basis, but we don't appreciate it as much. You know, it's there, we appreciate it subconsciously, but we don't realize how important it is, right? So Pascal Campion captures that. It could be as simple as just like running in the field with a kid or something, and he captures it so beautifully. And he's another illustrator that I love. And like Josh said, even I am a huge fan of Damien Hirst. The way he approaches his art with such audacity without having to fear what society thinks of him is commendable, because I think a lot of times artists always fear what society thinks of them. And he's broken all those boundaries. And I think I really, really appreciate that of him.
Well, how bold are you to express the societal evils or taboo things in your art? Have you done that anything before?
So, like I said, in poetry, I have done that to quite an extent, which is why I'm anonymous and people don't know who's writing it, which gives me the liberty and freedom to explore any spectrum without having fear to be judged, you know. But when it comes to art, I think I have reached a space where I'm pretty comfortable with what I put out, but I don't think I've reached that space where, you know, I'm at the epitome of it, where I can just put out anything and not be skeptical of it, because I know people know that I have made this, and I'm always skeptical about that fact, you know, which is what I'm trying to escape from in the poetry that I make, you know, that people read it and it can be anything, and I know I won't be judged because they don't know me. They either like it or they don't. It's as simple as that.
Oh, well, you just want your art to be reached out to the people, not who writes it, basically.
When it comes to the poetry I make, like I said, I would never write what I did, what I have been writing, if I knew people knew me, knew the person behind all of this. I wouldn't have, which is what I've tried to escape from in poetry. And I haven't been able to do that with art. And sometimes I think I should have done that, but also I don't regret not doing it, because at some point I really, when I make something, I want people to know that I've made it, sort of. It's a battle always, like, you know, I want people to know that I've made it. Alongside, I don't want people to know I've made it. So which is why I've tried to maintain a balance between art and poetry, and I've tried to like find middle ground, I guess.
Okay, what about you, Joshua? Have you tried any bold stuff?
So it depends on what we can depict. I mean, what we can call bold, because what is bold for me might not be bold for you, and it is actually very
that's
subjective.
diplomatic.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, if you talk about showing taboos, yes. Most of my artwork tries to depict a lot of those social evils in a very comical way, be it political or be it the taboo elements of society. Because at the end of the day, I just feel a lot of the problems, I mean, they are too raw to be depicted with a lot of emotion. They're too raw, like in a way that one thing is the society not accepting it is one thing, but to face a backlash is another thing. So a lot of the taboos are, because I feel people have become very sensitive as a society that speaking about one particular person might cause the death of 5 others. So it's rather better not to instigate people, but to show it in a way that, so that, you know, the ones who should know it would know what it is. The rest of the people would not be offended by it so much so that it might cause untoward incidents per se, though.
That's actually a safe way of playing.
Yeah.
Coming to the part where, have you ever felt like a government or any institution should have supported backed your artwork so that every artist will feel safe with finance, and their artworks are showcased every now and then, and they have a platform for that?
Yeah, I mean, I do feel that often, but what happens is a lot of times in a country like India, one thing is with the current scenario, we know that even for essential commodities, people are running around, and I mean, apparently the government does not have funds even for the essential commodities. It might be, I mean, to ask them to support artists is actually 10, 20 years in the future.
Too much to expect, actually, honestly, with the current situation. It's like, it would be quite questionable to even expect them to do something like as advanced when they're not even honestly being able to do what's actually the basic requirements, you know.
But there are a lot of organizations which support artists. That is actually really good. But on the logistical side of things, so imagine you start a pension fund for artists. With the way our government works and with the way the logistics of this government works, how many artists would that funds actually reach at the end? So that is what we should look into, So at the end of the day, yes, it is something that should be done, but can it be done is another question, though.
No, again, it depends upon group of artists forming their associations and then contributing it. That's what I think, rather than depending upon government, right?
Yeah.
So
honestly, while becoming an artist, is you need to draw a fine line between what you expect and reality. You know, it's always good to educate yourself on how much to expect or to expect anything at all. At the end of it, you just need to know that it's a struggle that you're going to have to go through by yourself. And it's great if you're going to get external support, but just be prepared of not getting it.
I think a lot of times artists have not asked for all those government support per se, a lot of times, because I feel once someone becomes an artist, they're actually, they're used to that certain uncertainty in their life, because, they know that it can go up. There might be months when a lot of their work sells, and there might be months when nothing sells as such. So once I think they make peace with that uncertainty, I don't think a lot of them would actually, even approach the government. So, and I don't know. So a lot of countries outside India do have, pension plans or other financial support, which is actually offered to artists. But in countries like India, art or anything of that matter, art, theater, music, etc., is considered non-essential. So I do not think they might give the support that is required.
But again, like you said, it's like important, like there are organizations independent of the government to support artists and stuff like that. Like recently, like we said, the Church Street First that happened was an organization that was independent of the government, but yet supported artists to come out and put their stuff without having it being looked down on. And I think it's important to rely on such organizations, and I think that's a more realistic expectation to have, rather than expecting it from higher hierarchy as the government and stuff like that, because that's honestly a very far unachievable or unattainable thing to expect from.
Yeah. So one thing I feel is, more than the government, the general public should actually be educated on how art is, or on the benefit, or not even the benefit. I mean, what you can say is to follow someone's passion per se, because I know a lot of times a lot of kids would want to pursue art as a profession, but they don't receive the support that maybe Wafa or I received from our parents and from our relatives per se. So a backup and a support is actually really required, and I think we need to educate the general public. At the end of the day, it's about being happy in what you're doing. So yes, you can earn a lot of money and have a great bank balance, but at the end of the day, when you go to sleep at night, if you're not happy with what you're doing, and if you dread waking up the next day and going back to do the same thing, then I feel that is a change that you need to look into, though.
Yeah, I think the first area to rely on is people who are close to you, for instance, family. Like Josh said, for him and I, we've honestly been really fortunate to have our family and parents support us through this entire thing. And, when everything else fails, that, okay, I have someone to go to, I have someone to, seek refuge in. And a lot of people don't have that. And which is why they end up doing something else that they're not passionate about, just for the certainty of it, because they know if it fails tomorrow, they have nowhere to go. And it's really difficult for a lot of people like that. And not everyone is fortunate to have parents who understand the dream, even if it seems a little, if it's not too absolute. Not everyone understands it. And I think that's a struggle a lot of artists face, and they eventually just plunge into something they don't really like doing and dread waking up every morning to work. And I think it's sad, but I think we need to educate people a lot on that. And I think which is happening off late, like considering the current generation that we have, like I said, they're really art driven, and they appreciate art for what it is. So I think in the future, it's definitely going to be different and not the way it is now, considering how well we are currently. And I think the future would just be much, much better than what it is right now. And it's something to look forward to, especially when it comes to art or any sort of creative genre we're talking about here.
I hope that really works. I mean, that's what even I'm expecting. There's no point of doing that what we don't like, right? At the end of the day, we should like what we are doing. So my last question for today will be like, what would you like to pass on to the next generation? How do you want this art to be passed on to the next generation?
Okay, so art as such, even if you're not an artist, one thing you can teach your kids or teach anybody for that matter is to tell them that an artist is also a hardworking person like you and me. He might not like his work, but at least give him the respect that you would give a person of another profession. Because a lot of times artists are looked down upon as like maybe these drug-fueled people who are just like randomly making paintings and God knows what they're doing with life, who don't have any aim in life. But what they need to realize is like a lot of them do have a well put out plan of what they want to do in life. And so, yeah, the first thing I would say is like, yes, ask them to actually learn how to respect an artist, or, I mean, it's not a way of asking for respect, but rather just, respect what they do. It's not to be looked down upon in any way. And second is also like to be, if you feel like you have an artistic drive, it is uncertain, the future is uncertain, but if you have it, always take a plunge and just see what you can do with it, because you may never know, you might be the next best thing in art. If someone like Jason Skeldon actually thought of pursuing something else, you would not have like one of the best pop artists of our time right now. So that's something I would like to pass on to people.
Yeah, it's as simple as this. Like, for instance, tomorrow you have a kid and you see that your kid is drawing something instead of doing his math homework, his or her math homework. Just let him continue. Don't take away the sketchbook saying that, no, this is not what you're supposed to be doing. This is what you're supposed to be doing. That's what you shouldn't do. And I think a lot of children, if they were given that liberty, they would tend to explore more of themselves rather than being just, constricted by what they're supposed to be doing, like what people think that they're supposed to be doing. And obviously studies and everything is important, but never take away a passion or a hobby, that because a lot of times hobby is something that you can make a profession of, and I think that's really important. Like, encourage your kids to just go out, play, experience the world for what it is, and just make them understand that their dreams matter to you and it's important. I think that's all it is.
Yeah, as your kid is growing, they might say something that's completely out of the ballpark. Maybe one fine day they might come and say, I want to be like India's next top spy. Maybe, that might seem out of the world for you at that particular point. But what you can do is, just don't destroy that dream per se. Maybe just tell them, okay, let's do this. And let's see, maybe a lot of times it might be like, let's just say that a spark of fire during childhood. But if they do want to pursue something of that, this one, obviously do help them, because if they've actually been consistently in love with that particular thing for that long, you know that they can be in love with it for the rest of their life, and they would know a way to monetize it at the end of the day.
True. That I think that works out for future generation. We should be supportive. A beautiful body perishes, but not the work of art never dies, right? So I would like to thank both of you for pulling out your time for making the show happen. And it was really nice to have you on our show, and I really enjoyed it. Hope you did the same.
Interacting with you guys, and it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, we don't obviously get a lot of these opportunities to actually talk about art, and it is actually really heartening to actually be given this opportunity to speak about it. So yeah, thank you for giving us the platform to talk about art stuff.
This is what we are talking about when you're speaking about the current generation and the idea of supporting artists. Like, this could be an example that you have us here talking about art, and I think that's a huge revolution to have, right? It wouldn't have been like this like years ago or something, because who would like want to watch something like previously? People wouldn't want to watch something just having like two artists talk about art. They'd be like, why would I watch that? But now it's not like that, and that's really a revolution, honestly.
Thank you so much,
Dhanuja. Thank you.